on fine-tuning, OpenAI's fine-tuning process. And about a month and a half ago, we very quickly and drastically pivoted towards embeddings and generative search and all the things that I'm about to show you, because I just think it's a much more interesting and exciting area. Fine-tuning has its own benefits as well, but I'm just completely obsessed with the embeddings and generative search space. So that's what we're doubling down on. Now, what is my AskAI? In a nutshell, it's your own ChatGPT, and it uses your own help docs, your own files, your own website, web pages, content, any information really that you can think of and throw at it. You add in the content, you create your own ChatGPT, and then you can launch it anywhere from your website, Slack, whatever you can think of. We really want to make it as easy as possible for any person or organization to harness some of this new technology and apply it to their own business, to their own situation. So first up, let's just talk about how it all works. And I'm just going to share my screen. Amanda, I can't see. Oh, there it is, my bad. Just go enable this.
I think we lost Alex, but I'm sure he'll be joining us again shortly. In the meantime, we have a question for James Briggs in the chat. James, where do you get your shirts?
Thanks, Amanda.
Wouldn't be a good demo without that happening.
Of course, of course. Yeah. We were just filling the time with some silliness. So James, you can answer that in the Q&A, and Alex, why don't you take it back?
Sorry to upstage the silliness, James. Right, so we're going to explain how my AskAI works. Can you guys see that okay? Amanda, does that come through?
That is.
Yeah, we can see.
Cool, okay. So this is our website. We're going to show kind of the end result first and then work backwards from there. Now, this is actually an AskAI that's been embedded within our own site. And we're just going to ask it, because why answer a question when AI can do it for you, right? That's kind of the topic of today. How does my AskAI work? And what it's going to do is it's going to look at all the help docs that we've trained this on, and it's going to look at those, and it's going to try and come back with the best answer possible, even if this answer isn't specifically defined. And certainly this paragraph you see here isn't actually written just like that. So my AskAI works by breaking down your content into chunks, mapping into space, blah, blah, blah. We will look into that in a little bit more detail and actually think about what's happening there. A better explanation, and maybe a shorter one, is if we think about, okay, how do we explain this like I'm 5 years old? This is a really nice little definition. I don't think I could write it better myself. AskAI is like a really smart robot that can answer your questions. It reads lots of books and information, and then when you ask it something, it tries to find the best answer from all the things it's read. Kind of like a teacher, but you're actually speaking to a robot. Couldn't have put it better myself. So what's actually happening here? So when you're adding content to our tool, we break that content up into small chunks. We then embed each of these chunks with OpenAI's embeddings API, which basically turns text into numbers in a very simplistic sense. These then get stored in a database, a vector database, which is Pinecone, which is our host today. Now, when you ask a question like, how does AskAI work? We kind of follow a very similar process. We start by taking that question, we embed it, we turn that text into numbers, and then we query Pinecone, we query our database. And Pinecone is very smart and will find chunks of text that are very similar to our question. It'll return a couple of these chunks, we'll pass it through a custom ChatGPT prompt, and we'll say, answer this question with some of these chunks of information, and then it'll write this nice bespoke answer for us. Now, what's really interesting is, as a user of our service, you don't see any of that stuff that I just explained. And that's important because it's technical, it's complex. A lot of people are going out there and building their own, which is amazing. And it's, you know, it's not the most technically complex thing to go and do yourself. But obviously, this is not going to be in the domain of a lot of businesses and a lot of people. So we kind of handle all of that side for you. You drop in your docs and you can just ask your questions. We've also spent a lot of time engineering the prompts in our entire system around ensuring that we only answer questions that are contained within your context, within the information that you've uploaded. So we don't get this hallucination, which is this topic in AI right now, which is ChatGPT is kind of getting a little famous for, which is, it lies, it confidently lies and makes stuff up. It sort of bends and warps the truth a little bit. And it can be really hard to know when it is and isn't telling the truth sometimes. So we're trying to solve that by allowing you to put in your own information that may be private and ChatGPT doesn't even know about because it's not on the public web, or it's really recent and new. And obviously ChatGPT has a cutoff in terms of all of the kind of world information that it's consumed. So that's a really kind of important difference between us and ChatGPT. Now let's actually jump in and start building. So I'm just going to move this bar here. So we're going to build the James Briggs AskAI, the Briggs bot. And we're going to start by adding in a transcript from one of James's amazing YouTube videos about semantic search. So this is semantic search. We're actually going to put in some of these nice references that'll come in handy later. And we're going to go ahead and build that. And this is going to look at that. It's going to break it up into chunks. It's going to embed it. It all happens fairly quickly. And then actually it's ready to use straight away, which is pretty cool. So a pretty topical question would be, how is Pinecone being used in this process? It's actually created those questions automatically from your content just to get going a little bit. And then hopefully James would agree this is a fairly accurate answer, but Pinecone is a vector database and it's being used to index the data and a bunch of other details. And obviously we could explain this like M5 again if we really wanted to break this down or translate it or give a longer explanation. And there's a bunch of kind of follow-on questions that we could ask there. But what happens if we ask it something that it might not know about? So what are sparse, dense embeddings? And we'll talk about what this is in a second. But this isn't something that's contained within that transcript. And importantly here, it's not going to try and make up an answer. And in this case, make the James Briggs bot look silly by saying something that is incorrect, right? So what we're going to do to fix that is we're going to add in a little more content. And we're going to add in a transcript from another one of James's YouTube videos, which actually covers sparse, dense embeddings. I won't bother with the information this time. We'll put that in there. And again, it's going to look at that big chunk of text. It's going to break it up. It's going to go through the embedding process. And then we're going to be able to ask that same question. And it's going to think about it and it's going to come back and it's going to tell us what the answer is. So you can see there then that adding of that new transcript has actually made a difference to what it can and can't answer. So it shows really clearly about the kind of domain of information that this thing can and can't answer questions on. And then a really nice thing, which a lot of this tech supports out of the box, is we support 95 languages out of the box, both in terms of the content you upload and the questions you ask. So if there's any Spanish speakers in the audience, and this is basically us asking the same question, and you can kind of get the gist there that this is a similar answer, albeit in Spanish this time. So that's a kind of simple example. Now we're going to rumble over to a slightly more complex example, and this is a Pinecone developer assistant that I made earlier. Uploaded a bunch of their web pages that it can crawl and get the text from, PDFs, docs, text files, CSVs. You can really throw a whole bunch of different information at this thing. And what we're going to do now is we're going to think about how can we customize this a lot more, because the use case is going to be Pinecone as a business want to put this somewhere that their developers can access to answer their questions and kind of act as a lead into some of the developer documentation. So we'll give it a bit of a description so it has some context, which is about developer questions so people know what to ask it. We're actually going to edit the suggested questions because we want to have a nice broad range and not necessarily ones that are automatically generated. So 3 kind of topics that we'll have in here. Some nice kind of starter questions for developers to get going. So those will set in. We're going to actually change the answer style so it comes in bullets. So things are like nicely broken down and make a lot of sense. And you don't get like big chunks of text. We're going to change the placeholder text for the search input, just so again, we can kind of reinforce what this thing can and can't do. When it doesn't know an answer, we're going to change that. And we're going to push out to the Pinecone email support, just so people can do that. And at this stage, we'll just quickly save some of that and just test some of that stuff out. Who's James Briggs? unfortunately not mentioned in the documents that I've uploaded. So there it's going, okay, why don't you email our support? Then we're going to look at the references. And this is a really interesting thing that we pulled in. So when we ask a question like, what is hybrid search? When we're searching through all of the documentation, it's going to change one thing so you can see this first. Show the references. We actually show these chunks of text and the actual reference links to the documentation that we pull back. But in Pinecone's case, they say, well, we don't want to show all the chunks of text. We'd rather just, sorry for jumping around, we'd rather just show them the links to the most relevant developer docs. And then they can tag on that kind of compact references, as we call them. And it puts in the most relevant documentation. You can see there the links for the semantic and for the hybrid search are the relevant support docs for this question and for this answer there. So really nice kind of link in to some of their developer docs there. Then we're going to go even further, and we're actually going to customize how this thing looks, because Pinecone's a brand, they're a company, they want this thing to look how they're going to look. We provide each AskAI with a kind of public or private page that they can use, and we give you the URL that you can just share with anyone you want. And then you can customize a bunch of things like the logo, adding this nice CTA with a link back to the dev docs, the colors, the fonts, a bunch of other things. So you can start to see this looks a little bit like some of the Pinecone components on their website as well. Another nice feature is also the analytics. So picture yourself as a Pinecone as a business. They want to see what's the uptake of this new tool that we're using to get some basic analytics. But also really importantly, they get to download the questions and the answers that are coming from the developers. So they can start to see where the documentation is strong and where it may need a bit more information and where there is actually just some stuff that isn't included whatsoever. The next thing we're going to look at now as a final kind of two things is where can we place this that is outside of the kind of My AskAI site. So we're actually going to jump over to Card, which is a website builder. Just for this example, you could use Webflow, you could use Squarespace, you could obviously use your own website, you could use a bunch of different things. And what we're going to do is we're going to get our embed code from down here, and we're going to paste that into this custom HTML component, which is kind of familiar on most website builders. We're just going to publish this site. And then imagine this was actually Pinecone's developer site. They could place their own widget anywhere they want on the site, and this will interact with exactly the same way as we looked at it before. Another option going even further is to use the API that we put available, which gives developers kind of full customization over the inputs and the outputs. But we also just released a Zap app recently, which means that you can now harness your AskAI and connect it into thousands of different apps. So here we have a nice example of it being integrated into Slack, where we're actually launching a Slack app very soon. So you wouldn't even have to use Zapier to do this. But it's a really nice example of where you can bring AskAI, your AskAI, into the place where your team are doing the work. Teams, Slack, whatever else you're using, you can push that in there. And you can see then here that if we ask a question, it's going to use the API within the Zapier connection, and it's going to come back with an answer to the kind of questions that we were looking at earlier. So in this case, what is AskAI? And then it'll come back with a nice answer there, all within Slack, all within your kind of workspace. So that covers off everything that I wanted to share. Excited to hear any questions and interested to hear what you guys think. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Alex. And questions we do have. So let's jump right on into the Q&A. If there are additional questions you would like to ask Alex, again, please add them to the Q&A portion and not the chat. And we're going to get to as many as possible. So number one from James Taylor, what techniques and specific metrics are you using to monitor the back end and quantify the effectiveness of components like the embeddings and the subsequent prompt chain responses?
Okay, good question. Nice and specific to start. So I guess we can break this into two parts. We can look at the different parameters that you can set when you're embedding, and you can think about how do you test for the quality of changing those different parameters. Talk about that in a second. And then you can think about the actual completion, the prompt, how the answer is being constructed from the information that we get from Pinecone. And obviously, there's a bunch of settings that you can put within that. I think it's fair to say that we and probably a lot of other businesses are in a very early stage of kind of testing at scale all these different parameters. Like everyone is just experimenting right now on what is the best solution. And I hope James would agree with this statement that there really isn't a right answer for like how big should your chunks be when you embed them, or how exactly should you write your prompt when it comes to doing like extractive Q&A or something like this. So there's a lot of trial and error. You've got to think about, what is the common use case in for your particular platform. This probably isn't going to be amazing for, I don't know, like research papers and trying to summarize those, right? That's not what we're trying to do as a business. We're trying to give you an answer that is buried within that research paper, not tell you everything about that research paper in like 5 bullets. That's just a different kind of product. And the way that you embed and write your prompt will be very, very different to that. We have done a lot of experimentation for embeddings on like the chunk sizes and the way that we run that process. And the same for how we write the prompts, which is probably where we spend the majority of our time kind of experimenting and iterating and changing. A little bit of time being spent on changing some of the core parameters of the OpenAI ChatGPT APIs in terms of things like temperature and top P and frequency penalties and these kind of things to make sure you're not getting repetitive answers and this kind of stuff. I'd love to say we had a really elaborate system that was like test this prompt versus this prompt, and you kind of know which is better. But it feels like whack-a-mole sometimes, right? Because you develop what feels like a really good prompt and it works for 9 out of 10 use cases really well. And then you come up with a 10th use case from a user and it doesn't work for them, or you've broken language support, or like something else is happening because the way that it follows prompts is not incredible sometimes. Obviously, that's got a lot better with GPT-4. So yeah, just a lot of experimentation, James, and no silver bullets, unfortunately. Hope that helps.
Yeah, so you just spoke a little bit about chunking, but Chris in particular wanted to know, how do you chunk? So how many sentences is in each chunk? Do you use sentence overlaps? So if you could speak to that a bit.
Yeah, so I guess most AI models in a kind of simplistic sense deal in tokens in terms of their limits. Tokens and characters have a kind of rough mapping in the OpenAI world. It's about 4 characters to a token, depending on the language you're using in the character set, Cyrillic, Mandarin, whatever, that varies quite a bit. So it's quite difficult to set your limits based on words. Characters is a bit safer, but tokens is probably the safest in terms of saying we only want our chunks to be this big, and it's best to define that in terms of tokens. We started out in characters, and I think it's a good simplistic case, but it can break occasionally for like Hebrew, right? That recently like threw a spanner in the works a couple of weeks ago when we were like starting things out. So that's one way to think about how you break things up there. In terms of the content length or how you actually break it up, there's a bunch of really great libraries like LangChain, which I know Yasser is using, with like, I think text splitting is the name of the kind of sub package you can use there, that actually you can just tell it how big you want the chunks to be and how much overlap and this kind of stuff. We actually built a lot of that ourselves, just so we can have like maximum configurability over how we do some of that stuff. But yeah, LangChain, if you're just starting out, is a great place to like think about how big your chunks are going to be, how you're going to split them up, and where you're going to pass them on to next. So that's a good starting point.
Yeah, super helpful. We actually just did a event with Harrison Chase, the founder of LangChain. So you can check out and learn a little bit more about that via the event recording, which you can find on our YouTube or social. So this Mitt wants to know something specific to Pinecone usage. So James, if you have any additional color, feel free to jump in. But how do you separate customer data within Pinecone database? Do you create a separate index in Pinecone for each customer?
I think we see different people do this in different ways. So I mean, you can use namespaces, you can use different indexes. It kind of depends on, or you can even use filters. It depends on which approach you want to go for. But I actually think Alex probably has a more hands-on like insight system than what I do.
Yeah, happy to answer that one. So James mentioned namespaces and indexes, probably the two biggest ways you can separate data. Indexes, are probably more of a, I don't know what the technical word is, but the walls between your information there is much higher than namespace, where that is basically an identifier against all your information within the same index, all that data sitting together in the same database and not kind of partitioned in a kind of slightly more secure way. Namespaces are still a very secure way of separating information. And as long as you're handling namespaces and how you connect to Pinecone in a secure way, there's no way that users can see what's in other namespaces. The reason that we take that approach, I'd be interested to hear if Yasser does anything differently. I imagine he does, because otherwise his Pinecone bill would be super expensive, would be you'd have to pay for each index for each customer. And that's going to cost you a minimum of like, I don't know, $60, $70, whatever it is. So setting up an index for each customer on a small scale for people with only a couple of docs would be like incredibly cost inefficient. If you had an enterprise client and you had loads of different enterprise clients, then you'd probably want to give them each their own Pinecone index. So their data is like super secure and partitioned. And obviously if they're spending thousands of dollars a month with you, then it doesn't really matter that they're paying for their own index. So yeah, we use namespaces. It's cost effective. It's secure enough for our purposes. And there's no way that people can see other people's data anyway. So it's a pretty neat solution.
Great, thank you. When it comes to integrating an organization's knowledge base, example, Guru or Confluence, what are some ways to deal with different permissions and prevent the Q&A bot from answering questions with data a user shouldn't have access to?
So right now, the way that we would handle that would be that you would build an AskAI and upload content that users using that AskAI would be kind of eligible to see. We don't have a concept of kind of different permissions within a single AskAI so that certain users can see a certain tranche of the content and other users can see another tranche of the content. It's an interesting use case. I can't say we come across it too regularly as a request from users, because I think they would just create like an internal AskAI with certain pieces of information, then a public AskAI with another kind of tranche of information, and maybe there's some overlap as well. So that's kind of how we would handle that at the moment.
Great. How do you use auto-generate the questions after uploading the content?
Yeah, so I guess maybe this we start to delve into a little bit of secret sauce with some elements of it, but if you put a piece of information into ChatGPT and ask it to do something with that information, like write questions, then it's going to be pretty proficient at doing that. You just got to figure out a way of getting the sense of the entire document into that so that it can write questions which are not about just the first like 3 paragraphs, basically. So you can probably read between the lines there and figure out a little bit what we're doing there. But yeah, we're using ChatGPT and some of that kind of superpower to generate questions off kind of large parts of that document.
If the system is capturing or deleting new data, that requires to keep syncing with Pinecone. So my question is, how do you create, update, or delete embeddings at scale with Pinecone? So this part your experience, James, also feel free to hop in.
So I'll put in quickly. I mean, adding content is like we spoke about, that can be done at scale. You can upload through the UI. We're also about to launch an upload API as well. And we offer a couple of bulk functions for some of our customers and clients as well behind the scenes for like thousands of docs and stuff. And that seems to work pretty well. We don't see any issues with that. Deleting, same as adding, like you can just delete at scale. That's obviously a much faster operation. Updating, you can update the information within an individual vector or like, chunk of text and numbers. The most efficient way probably to do that at scale would be to delete it and then to add the new information on top of that, as opposed to trying to find like individual vectors and updating them one by one. Or maybe there's a more efficient way of doing that. But at least the efficient way that we see at the moment is we'll just delete the information associated with the old web page and update it with new information on the web page. And that's all like kind of totally seamless to the end users. They don't need to know how that works, but like they can very easily update content and remove it. Yeah.
Perfect. We'll ask one more question, and I know there are still a few remaining. If you want to follow up with me directly, I'll get your questions to Alex. You can reach me at amanda@pinecone.io. I will add that to the chat, but we'll end on this note. So how are summary questions handled? What if there is not a specific summary section present in the document, but I still want a summary of the whole document?
Yeah, so this is probably a bit off topic for like our tool, which is about kind of finding answers from within a document. But there was a really interesting piece on OpenAI's site, which you can find if you do the right Googling, which talks about this kind of chain summarization technique where you take as big a chunks of a book as you can, and you summarize each of those, and then you put the summaries together, and then you keep kind of summarizing down as a tree. And they ended up summarizing Alice in Wonderland into like a single paragraph, like from the entire book. So it's a kind of chained method that you have to do that. Maybe there's something on LangChain that can do that, but yeah, dig into OpenAI's docs and they talk about how you can summarize a kind of gigantic piece of information into something really short.
Great. Well, thank you for your expertise, your knowledge, and sharing with us. Round of applause. Again, I always say this is the thing I miss the most about in-person events when we do these. Round of applause.
Pretend I can hear it. Thank you.
Yeah. You have me. So thank you so much. Again, if you have additional questions for Alex or we weren't able to answer your questions, you can reach out to me personally. I will add my email to the chat. Thank you, Alex. Now we're going to turn it over to our friend Yasser. Yasser, how's it going?
Great, I'm happy to be here.
We are happy to have you. I'm going to turn things over to you. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Yasser. I'm a fourth-year computer science student based in Toronto. So I should be graduating this May. I did like a few tech internships, but I've always been doing side projects. And then Chatbase is my latest side project that turned into a real company. The way I started working on like AI projects and vector embeddings and stuff is I found LangChain super early on. And then I started like playing with just writing Python scripts. And then like I saw the potential as soon as I started playing with it. I talked to a few like companies and like few friends who I think would need something like this. And I saw a need for basically creating your own chat GPT or a chat GPT that at least knows your data and can also like be a normal chat GPT that you can ask a question other than your data. But the main reason is that you can inject your own data into chat GPT and then ask it questions. So I'm using the same technology as Alex is using. So same thing, embeddings. So I take a chunk of text. I take a big piece of text. I chunk it, embed it, put it in Pinecone. And what embeddings does is that it helps you do semantic search. So semantic search means that instead of doing keyword search, which is like the old way of searching, you now do semantic search. And the difference is you don't have to use the same word or even like you don't have to do similar words. You can just, if the meaning of the whole chunk is similar to your question, then semantically, both of them are going to be close to each other. And then when you ask a question, I'm going to go to Pinecone and find like the chunks that can have the answer to that question by doing similarity search. And fortunately, Pinecone makes something like that super, super easy. So yeah, I'll share my screen. I'll show you what Chatbase is and how it works. Can you guys see this?
Yep.
Cool. So this is the end product. So basically, let me refresh. So what people use Chatbase for is to get a chatbot they can embed on their website like this, that can answer questions about their website, their content. If you have a company, it can answer questions about your company. If you have like an open source project, it can answer questions about your documentation. If you're just an individual who has a blog, you can train it on all the content you have and then chat with the content. So this is the chatbot that I created using Chatbase for Chatbase. And then you have here like suggested questions. So let's ask like what Chatbase is. Actually, let's go here because I can see there's another demo here. Let's ask what Chatbase is. So it answers. Chatbase is an AI chatbot builder, which it came up with this answer by looking at the document that I uploaded that explained what Chatbase is. And then it came back with the relevant chunks from that document that might have the answer to the question. And then it gave the chunks plus the question to ChatGPT, and it says like, using this context, answer this question. And that's what it does. And then you can ask follow-up questions. You can ask, how can I upload data? So it tells you how you can upload data, and all of this is coming from the document. And the cool thing is, this is a chat interface. So you can say like, explain. You can say explain in simpler terms, and it knows that this is asking about this message. And now it's explaining in simpler terms. It's not using like .pdf or .txt. So I'm going to show you like how to create a chatbot. So you come here, you create an account, and then you say build a chatbot, and then you choose your data source. So you can choose a website. You can choose text, which is you can just paste any text here, or you can choose a file or multiple files. If you choose a website here, you can add your website, and then what Chatbase does it's going to crawl the whole website. And then using all of the content on your website, it's going to create the chatbot. So if I say, this is like another project that I had, SAPal, and then I can go here and say, I want to exclude the terms. This page included the terms of service, and I want to exclude the privacy policy. So this is going to crawl the whole website, and it's going to exclude these pages. And also, if you only want to crawl, like, let's say the blog section of this website, you can just say this, and it says here, this will crawl all the links starting with SAPal/blog. So if you have blog/1 or blog/2, it's going to crawl all of these links too. But for now, I'm just going to crawl the whole website, excluding like these links. And then now I have a chatbot that knows everything about SAPal, which is another product. I can ask it like, what is SAPal? So it says SAPal is an AI writing assistant to help you complete sentences or paragraphs. I can also create it from a file. So I have a file here. Yeah, I have this. So this is a document explaining Chatbase. It has 9,000 characters almost. And then I can create a chatbot using this. And then this chatbot this is exactly like how I created the chatbot here. So I can ask it the same question. I can ask it, what is Chatbase? And it answers me. And the cool thing is that you can go to the settings, to your chatbot settings, and then you can edit a bunch of stuff to customize your chatbot. The coolest one, and the one I think people use the most, is this, which is the base prompt, or for people who are more technical, it's the system message. So this is super helpful, especially for companies, because this allows you to give your chatbot a name, a personality. You can give it instructions on how to behave. You can just say, I want you to answer all the questions in French, even if you're asked in English. You can just give it instructions to behave in any way you want. So it's super cool to see, like, some of my clients, they showed me how they're editing this base prompt. So some of them will say, your name is like company name, your name is X. Your personality is, let's say you're making a chatbot for Disneyland. So your name is Disney AI. Your personality is fun. You make jokes, you're silly, and you use a lot of emojis. So basically, by editing this, you're creating a persona or a character for your company. It doesn't have to be a company, but you're creating a character that has a name, a personality, and it also knows everything about your data and can answer any question about it. And then here you can choose the model. You can choose 3.5 or GPT-4. You can set the visibility and then the domains you want to embed your chatbot on. And then here you can edit the chat interface. So you can remove this, and let's say this is for Chatbase, right? So I'm going to say hi, Chatbase AI, and then ask me. So here you can edit the initial messages. You can also add suggested messages, which are the ones that show up here. You can say, what is the pricing? How does it work? And you can add as many as you want. You can also edit the theme. So if you have a like a dark website, a dark theme, you can edit this theme to be like this. And you can also edit the color of this message. So you can come here, you can like make it whatever you want. Let's make it this green. So now it's this green. And you can also edit this, the color of this, same way. And then a cool thing is you can, if you go here, you go to the dashboard, and then you see all the conversations that happened with your chatbot. This is empty because I didn't have conversations with it. But if I go, yeah, I actually want to talk about this too. Okay, I'm going to talk about this first. So if you go to featured chatbots, these are some of the chatbots that I added, and it's like public information that people can just like test Chatbase with different books or different authors. So here I have Paul Graham, which is the founder of Y Combinator. I added his website to Chatbase, and what Chatbase did is it crawled the whole website, and then it created a chatbot named Paul Graham AI, and then you can ask it questions like this: how to find co-founders, and these answers are generated using the content on Paul Graham's website and all his essays. And here it shows you all the sources that Chatbase used to come up with this answer by using vector embeddings. So these sources are stored in Pinecone, basically. And yeah, what I was trying to show you guys is the dashboard. So if I come here, I own this chatbot, so I can see what people, what the conversations they had with it. And if you own a chatbot on Chatbase, you're going to have your own dashboard, and then you see the conversations. So this is one of the conversations that people had with Paul Graham on Chatbase. Another thing I wanted to mention is the API. So if you come here, you can, Chatbase offers an API to do basically everything. You can create a chatbot, update a chatbot, delete a chatbot, and then chat with it. So basically, you can build your own Chatbase because I expose all of these APIs to you. So anyone can make their own website, and it can have the same functionality as Chatbase, but they can use Chatbase on the backend. And here, like I explain how to use the API. It's so similar to the OpenAI API. If people are familiar with it, it's the same. It's you use your secret key, and then messages are formatted the same way as the OpenAI messages. Yeah, I think this is it for Chatbase. Do you guys have any questions?
Do they ever? I'll jump right into the Q&A, but thank you so much for demoing Chatbase for us. Now, Chris has a question, same question he asked to Alex earlier about chunking. How do you chunk? How many sentences is in each chunk? Do you use sentence overlaps?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this is something that I don't think there's an objective answer to. I think it's trial and error, as Alex said. You can use libraries like LangChain to make this easier. And if you use like the default like settings on LangChain, I think it gives you a good enough result for like the general use case. But if you have like your own use case and you know your data, you know, let's say you have paragraphs and each paragraph is small enough that you can chunk it and embed it, and each paragraph is speaking about like a specific topic, they don't overlap, then it would make more sense to chunk each paragraph on its own instead of just adding everything all together. For Chatbase, because this is intended to be like customer facing, and I don't know like what data they're going to put. I'm using sentence overlap. I think I'm doing 2,000 characters, but what I try to do is that I go to the end of the sentence or the end of the paragraph and the beginning of the paragraph, just to make sure that I don't lose any meaning if I cut the sentence too short. So I go like 3,000 characters, and then I go to the end of the sentence or paragraph and to the beginning too, just to make sure I don't lose any meaning. And I also do a little bit of overlap for the same reason, because I don't want to lose any meaning when I'm doing chunking.
Makes sense. How is Chatbase able to crawl? A lot of questions coming in, so I'm losing my questions. How is Chatbase able to crawl the whole website? Does it read the whole HTML doc? A technical explanation would be awesome. Thank you.
Sounds good. Yeah. So what it does is that when you come here and you give it a URL, basically on the backend, Chatbase opened that HTML page, and then it scans the whole page for other links within that website. So if you have a link to, let's say, Instagram, it's going to ignore that. But if you have a link to chatbase.co/blog, it's going to go to that and then do the same thing. So it's something called recursive crawling of a website. And you just have to make sure that you don't crawl the same page twice, because you can have a page pointing to another page and then the other page pointing to the first page. So just keep track of the pages you already crawled, and then you can search for this. It's just search for JavaScript or Python crawler, recursive crawler, and you're going to find it.
Great. Similarity search always returns results. How are you able to tell when you should not answer a question because you don't have data about it or about this?
Yeah, this is a good question. So right now, the best solution, or what Chatbase is doing, is I'm embedding each question, and then I'm going to Pinecone, getting the results, and then giving all of that to ChatGPT. But then I in the base prompt, I specifically say to ChatGPT not to use any other data from, let's say the question is about like, what's the speed of light, right? If you ask what's the speed of light to the Paul Graham bot, so it's going to come up with sources, but those sources are not going to have the answer to the question, right? But ChatGPT is smart enough to just ignore all the sources and then tell you like, I don't know the answer to the question, because in the base prompt here, you say, if you don't know the answer, just say you don't know the answer.
So we have some Chatbase specific questions about document limits. So what's the document limit that I can upload into a chatbot in Chatbase?
So currently, if you go to the pricing page, it says here, for the hobby plan, you get 10 chatbots and then 2 million characters per chatbot, per chatbot. I'm trying to increase this limit, especially for like the standard and the unlimited plans, because this limit is currently like a technical limit, but I think I can increase it. If you want to know like what your document, how many characters it has, so if you go here, build chatbot file, and then attach like 1 or 2 files on the basic plan here. So it's going to tell you like 52,000 characters. The problem is when you're trying to upload a website, it doesn't tell you, and I'm trying to find a solution for that.
Also, if anybody has a solution, feel free to add it to the chat.
Yeah,
I like to give our community the opportunity to contribute. We have a question. I want to create an application which should answer based on the data feed by the user. Can I just give a directory path having multiple kinds of file like PDF, doc, text, CSV, Excel, etc. as an input to the chatbot? If yes, how will you parse all these different kinds of files and generate a single knowledge base?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this is something I'm currently doing with Chatbase. So Chatbase, there is an option to upload multiple documents. It can be PDF, text, docs, whatever. And what I'm doing for Chatbase is that OpenAI suggests that you ignore all formatting. So if you have like new lines or titles in the document, the best way to do this, in my experience, is to ignore all the formatting. Just keep the punctuation and the spaces between like words. So you just like put everything all together, and then you just have to trust that semantic search works and that ChatGPT is smart enough to find the answer to your question based on the given sources.
How is Chatbase using ChatGPT 3 for generating answers? You mentioned it, but I missed it. I know the embeddings are stored in Pinecone, and I thought you are using completion endpoint.
Yeah, I am using completion endpoint. So the flow is once someone asks a question, I embed that question, go to Pinecone, get the relevant passages from the document, and then I make a request to ChatGPT saying, given these sources and this question, what is the answer, basically? So yeah, I use the completion endpoint.
We have a few questions about ChatGPT hallucinations. How do you deal with making sure the chatbot does not hallucinate?
So the solution for this, if you want to keep using ChatGPT instead of GPT-4, is a lot of experimentation with prompt engineering. As I said on Chatbase, you have the option to change the base prompt. So you can change it, experiment, and then ask it random questions and see how it behaves. In my experience, 3.5 is always going to be not as good as 4. 3.5 doesn't listen to the system prompt as good as 4. If you want the best experience and if you want to have like a product-facing in production chatbot, you should change this to GPT-4, which is going to be more expensive, but it's much better at staying in character. So if you give it a name, personality, it's much better to stay in character. And it's also much better to just provide answers from the given sources and not hallucinate. I think GPT-4 is much better at not hallucinating, especially if you give it good context.
We have somebody who says, thanks, Yasser. How did you arrive at the pricing? What are the considerations made for minimizing costs with index creations? Kind of a business-oriented inquiry.
Yeah, one of the biggest problems I'm facing right now is that I have a free tier on Chatbase. So a lot of people just use Chatbase once, they upload one document, and then I put it on Pinecone, and then I have to have like an index running for all of the free tier customers. So what I'm planning to do, and I think this would make the pricing like my margins better, or maybe I can lower the prices too, is that I'm gonna say, like, if you don't use the chatbot for maybe like 30 days or a month or like 60 days, then your chatbot will be automatically deleted. And I think if you're trying to build something similar, or like if you're doing consulting for like bigger enterprise customers, the way to lower the pricing, especially on Pinecone, is to delete whatever you're not using.
Yeah. So I think we have time for one more question. How do you decide if it's better to fine tune or to use embeddings?
So in my experience, embeddings work much better if you want your chatbot to know your data. I think fine tuning is good if you want your data to be outputted like in a certain format, but in my experience, embeddings are good enough and are the way to go if you want to inject data to ChatGPT and make it answer questions about this data, which Chatbase is doing.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time showing us all things Chatbase. Very cool product. Anything else you want to say in your in our final closing as we hit time?
No, I just want to thank you for having me. This was super fun.
Of course. And again, audience members, if you still have questions, you can reach out to me and I will serve as your inquiry liaison to Yasser and Alex. You can reach me at amanda@pinecone.io. And yes, this video will be available, and I will send that out shortly. So again, another silent round of applause for our incredible speakers, and we hope to see you at our next event. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.